I actually told only a few people. I like to hear everyone's story but mine. And the reason is because it's hard for me to go back and visit a place that was dark, lonely, and shame. Because every time I hear people telling stories about like how they go in a Christian home, or their parents or ministers, and then they always know life to be beautiful. But for me, my story didn't start like this, and I wish it did. But at the same time, I know that God has written my story. God didn't order it to go the way that everyone else go, but my story is unique the way God put it. A rabbi once said, God made people because he loves stories. And every time I think about it, it reminded me that my story is not necessarily my story, but it's God's story. And I'm just an actor living the script that he has already worked. Nehemiah put it better. He said, the word of the Lord come to me saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nation. My story and your story have been written by God. To give you a little bit background about myself, I grew up in a small village with a population of 700 to 1,000 people. Everyone has their little gods and believe everything have a spirit in it. The trees, the rock, the rivers, everything, they attach spirit to them. So it was a polytheistic worldview. So for me, growing up, I always confused about how can there so many gods? How can everyone claim that they have their own God? That may not make sense to you completely. But think about, I don't know if you remember the story of Jacob leaving and his uncle Laban and taking his wife with him, and one of his wives stole his dad's God. So this is similar culture back in Haiti. They have like objects that represented their own God. And some of them worship the rivers, the tree, the rock. We sometimes kids talk about like which God are more powerful, or which family God is more powerful. By the age 11, I become very skeptical by the system because it didn't make sense to me. I was so confused about it. So I went to see for myself. So I was in a place between doubt and reality. I find like skeptical is really a hard place to be. You're really struggling with yourself, seeing a reality and hearing story, but you can't really know for sure if it's true. So that set me to a spiritual journey. If I may borrow C.S. Lewis' word, that he expressed it better than I can put it in my own word. He said it is a spiritual loss, and like the loss of the body, it has the fatal power to make everything else in the world seem uninteresting while it lasts. So that was kind of where I was. I wanted to know if those gods really exist. I wanted to know the truth, if there's actually a all-powerful God among all those gods, which one is really true. So by the age of 11, almost 12, I started having a seizure. I grew up in a family of 12, so my parents, from all my relatives, I feel like my parents were the most poor. Part of it because they have more mouth to feed. There was 12 of us. And a lot of the time I would spend times with my aunt and going to her house and help her clean, and then she normally would feed me like one of her child. And one time after she was done cooking, I was in the kitchen. And then I had my seizure in the kitchen and fell into a cooking fire while nobody was there. A lady who was selling rice heard a noise in the kitchen and called to my aunt and says, there's someone crying in the kitchen. And when she come and saw me, I was all cooked, burned to a 3rd degree. So she reached out to my dad. And when my dad come and find me, everyone was in shock. I was burned from my belly, my arm, my legs. So my dad took me home, started putting toothpaste on my burn and thinking it will help healing and try and give some home remedy. We're in a village where there's no primary doctor. So he's doing all the things he can to help me heal up. But after 3 days, I was so affected that my dad said my body started smell. People come and said there's no way he's gonna survive, and wanted my father to kill me. And my dad refused to. And he couldn't drive to the city, not because he didn't have money, but there's no road to drive. It was a rainy season. So they had to take a boat out of the village, come to the city, and take me to the hospital. When I get there again, it was another story. All the doctors say, he's not going to survive this. We can't do surgery on him. My parents didn't have the money to pay the surgery, so they didn't want to use the equipment. But also the doctor said, there's no way they're going to survive that. The only way for me to survive is to cut my arms, because it was the most affected. There was barely any skin in my arms, and I was very skinny, so they can't do any graft on my body. So, but when I get to the hospital, I think God meant for me to get there, because this is where he was going to reveal himself to me. All the loss I have in the back, before I come to the hospital, before my accident, everything that led to the moment, I think God was working in my heart, even though when I didn't know it. Like Jeremiah said, he set me apart. He knows he had a story that is different than what I was living for me. When I get to the hospital after they done the surgery with me and went to the hospital and spent 6 months in the hospital without any type of therapy, God has shown himself to me not once, not twice, but multiple times while I was in the hospital. So I'm jumping in a lot of hoops. If you have questions later, you can ask me, because I only have like 8 minutes. And I normally share my story for 45 minutes when I go to place. So when I get to the hospital, after they done the surgery, I was laying in my bed for 6 months without any type of therapy. It was a place where all my skepticism was about to fly away, where I would have no excuse but to meet the God, and there will be no escape, because I was going to meet God, the true God there. It is clear to me that God was intended for him to meet me there. So one day, I was 3 months after my surgery, I was laying in the hospital. A missionary man walked in the hospital and says, he woke up one night and didn't know why, but felt the need to come to the hospital. And then he come in the hospital, really only have like $5 Haitian in his pocket, probably equivalent to $1.50 American. And he bought me a Coke. And he told my parents, I have to return back to the U.S., but I would like to connect him with another missionary who can help with medical need and food and things like that. And he connected me with another missionary who come to the hospital and started praying with me and spending and buying me medication that I need and help with food. But they couple also have to return back to the United States. They live in Michigan. So I think they connect me with another missionary, a third missionary. So she come in the hospital. I remember the day when she was coming in the hospital. I saw her at a distance, walking to the door, and her eyes was right on me. And then I can see the love, the kindness in her face. And she walked in the hospital, didn't even know what to say. I didn't know any English. She doesn't know any Creole. So she grabbed my toes, started playing with it. This little piggy went to the market. This little piggy went to home. I have no idea what she was saying. But later she explained to me. I mean, telling people, sharing the gospel without using word if necessary. I'm thinking of Francis Assisi, who said this word. I can see the passion in her eyes. And she shared the gospel with me that day in a million ways. And then 3 days, actually, three evangelists before her 3 Haitian men come in the hospital and share the gospel with me before I met her. And they shared the gospel with me using the book of Job and telling me, of course, Job was a man that God blessed because he chose God. God gave him everything he needed, and then God healed him again, the whole prosperity things. And then I find the gospel, the way they present it was really attractive. And every time I look back, I say, that's a really bad way of presenting the gospel to someone. The story of Job is not really a nice story. But anyhow, it did the work. I believe, and that I seriously believe and thought God was going to give me my arm back. I prayed for months. When there was no arms, I started doubting again. But when they were presenting the gospel to me and telling me about Jesus and Jesus can save me and what he did for Job, there's a sense of emptiness in my heart that I never felt before. Like somehow I feel like really all the air in my body was rising up. That is a true God. That's the true gospel. That's the true person who can bring salvation to you. And then I give myself to Christ. and make the confession of faith. And of course, coming back from a background of open theism where you worship the God because of what they can give you, or the God gives you when you worship them. That's kind of the worldview where I'm from. So I expected then if I believe in God, He's going to give me everything that I needed. And then 3 months after my conversion, when nothing happened, one of my sister, she died like 5 years ago. She told me, Kismet, God didn't promise you a timetable when He's going to do certain things in your life. But I know for sure He has a plan for you. So she shared with me, and I regained my faith again and trust God. After 6 months in the hospital, the third missionary come and tell my family that she want to help me come to the U.S. for better medical treatment. And I come to the U.S. for 6 months. There is another story again, adopting and things like that. After I get converted, I devoured the book of Job, reading it from back, like pretty much within a week. When I came to Michigan again, started reading the full gospel. And as I read the gospel from Matthew to Luke, from Matthew to John, I find out like everything that Jesus was doing almost like lively, like reading it literally, like seeing the miracle as if I was in the story. Then there I started growing as a Christian. And then 6 months later, we turned back to Haiti. And then I happened to live like about a minute away from the church I attend. So to me, every time I look back, I like God placing those events to lead me where I was supposed to be. Even after the 6 months, I left the village. And when I left the village and come to the hospital, I didn't return back to the village until like 2 or 4 years later. And when I returned and visited the people, a lot of people in the village, the last time they saw me was when I went to the hospital. So for them, it was hard. They didn't think I could survive what happened to me. So when they see me again, the whole village come just to see me. And I was there with the missionary who bring me back home and visiting. So the whole village, we couldn't get out of the table, out of the house. All of them staying right in front of the door want to see me. Because there is no way they could have expected that I would survive the healing. And you know, God saved me. But He doesn't just save me. My whole family come to know Christ after the accident. Conservatively, my situation. And the village perspective now changed completely. I started the Bible camp like my freshman and sophomore year at Moody. And every year it's growing. Right now last year we have 125 students coming to the camp, hearing the gospel. And I fell with this passion because after what happened to me in the village, I didn't hear the gospel until I was 12, until the accident. And I realized there's a lot of people like my age, like that age, who never hear the gospel. And today I am here today. I think God intended it. And have not those events that lead up to this time, I would not be here today. I think that's pretty much enough time. Right? If you have any question, you can ask me later. I also have YouTube channel with all my story. You can visit short story. You can visit my YouTube channel too. Thanks.